Introduction, Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Larry Willson. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W. H. Fawcett. Introduction. They're going fast. Whiz Bang's greatest book, the Winter Annual Pedigreed Follies of 1921-22, hot off the press. Orders are now being mailed. There will be no delay as long as the supply lasts. If your newsstand's quota is sold out, pin a dollar bill or check or money order or stamps to the coupon on the back page, and receive our 256-page bound volume of jokes, jests, jingles, stories, potpourri, mailbag, and Smokehouse Poetry, the best collection ever put in print. Last year, our annual, which was only 1/4 as large as the 1921-22 book, was sold out on the Pacific Coast within 3 or 4 days, and not a copy could be bought anywhere in the United States within 10 days. So hurry up, first come will be first served. Pin your dollar bill to the coupon and mail to the Whiz Bang Farm, Robbinsdale, Minnesota. Don't write for early back copies of our regular issues. We haven't any left. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, America's magazine of wit, humor, and philosophy. Published monthly at Robbinsdale, Minnesota. We have room for but one sole loyalty, and that is loyalty to the American people. Theodore Roosevelt. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang employs no solicitors. Subscriptions may be received only at authorized newsstands or by direct mail to Robbinsdale. We join in no clubbing offers, nor do we give premiums. $2.50 a year in advance. Edited by a Spanish and World War veteran, and dedicated to the fighting forces of the United States. End of introduction.
Section 1 of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W. H. Fawcett. Drippings from the Faucet, Part 1. Gentle readers, wet your lips, for whilst with dry tongues thou art yearning, your obedient servant, Bilious Billy, is in the land of liberty, personal and otherwise, basking in Cuba's sunny clime in Havana, sucking soda through a straw. Soda! Sure, soda with a dash in it. When we grow tired of fast horses and saintly senoritas, it will be back again to the big pines of northern Minnesota for the fishing season at Brizzy Point Lodge. You know, folk, in the winter, we Minnesotans can't fish, as our Norwegian friends would say. Well, boys and girls, here I am on the road again, just like a wandering Jew. In making my present departure from Robbinsdale, I didn't know whether I was coming to Montreal or going to Cuba. The high cost of coal in Robbinsdale may be long for summer at Miami Beach, where there is no charge for hot rolls in the sand and a little chicken nearby. Then again, I was reminded of having seen Willie and Molly playing in the sand, indulging in youthful folly. The sand was terribly hot on Willie's back, and the sun was hot to Molly. Woke up in Chicago with an ice pack attached to my fevered brow, and appreciating that the United States is the land of personal liberty, I hied forth towards Miami to see if I might not be able to obtain a wee snifter. Miami is now the legal home of William Jennings Bryan, and I did not have much luck in satisfying an unquenchable thirst. Anyway, if I did, it wouldn't be nice to tell about. Mr. Bryan may have something to do with keeping Miami and the state of Florida bone dry, which it isn't. So more power to him. Florida may be dry, but in the unmortal words of our snuff-chewing hired man, I am pleased to report that there are a lot of damp rascals here. Understand, the Floridians are seriously considering Bryan for United States Senator. I had the pleasure today of driving through the backyard of the commoner's palatial home, but all I could see was the rear door in his smokehouse. Mr. Bryan was too busy addressing a Baptist convention to even invite me to lunch. Tomorrow, he's slated for a Bible talk in the city park, and if I get up in time and feel all right, I'll listen to his discourse. later, it didn't get up in time. After leaving Chicago, I stopped at Atlanta for a few days' sojourn. Here we struck nice, warm sunshine. The Atlanta ladies are a genial lot, but their costuming somewhat crashes with the constitutional scheme of affairs as laid down by the 18th Amendment. Their hats are full of cocktails, and sometimes also their heads, I'm told. In fact, a bird of paradise plume is quite in vogue in Atlanta. The information is also vouchsafed that some Atlanta girls are born foolish, while others marry. Overheard a rather humorous remark of a local celebrity, Clayt Robson by name, one evening in the lobby of the Kimball House. Robson is a well-known Georgian lobbyist and political boss, who is considered a power in the present state administration. Clayt jokingly spluttered to a group of friends that I was 21 years old and grown up before I knew that damn Yankee was 2 words. My visit to Atlanta brought to memory a conversation I had with Cole S. Blease, former governor of South Carolina, about 4 years ago. The governor very kindly invited me to his suite in the Selwyn Hotel at Charlotte, North Carolina, to partake of his private 20-year-old stock. While killing the quart of medicine, the subject of Atlanta came to the front. Here is the Bleasian description of the South's largest city, as nearly as I can remember. Atlanta is a hell hole of perdition. It is no place for a virtuous woman or an honest man. I cannot quite agree with Mr. Blease, for Atlanta treated me royally. The girlies here I found to be of true Southern stock, very shy and rather demure. I once heard the late Pitchfork Ben Tillman remark that the only family tree he could boast was that the women were virtuous and the men reasonably brave. From my cursory observations, this description fairly fits Atlanta. From Atlanta, our next stop was Jacksonville. Went for a joyride here, which ended up in a thrilling, though harmless, smash-up. Upon picking myself out from the wreckage, I thanked the kindly doctor for a safe delivery, which calls to mind these lines by Lincoln, or some other noted personage. Oh, why should the spirit of mortal be proud, as he rides in his swift-flying car like a cloud? A break in the axle, a bust in the tire, he passes from life to the heavenly choir. As a deer hunter, I'm a good farmer. Spent 10 days tramping the windfalls in the neighborhood of Breezy Point Lodge without even seeing a deer. Saw plenty of polecats, bobcats, and house cats, and nearly captured a porky. I learned lots about the habitats and habitations of the northern pine animals, and finally managed to knock down a spike buck, whatever that means, on the last day of the hunting season. Must admit, the buck almost shook hands with me before I was able to knock him over. However, I had a very good guide, Arthur Foote by name, but better known as Panther Pete. Pete has earned a regular living for 25 years as a trapper and deer hunter, and I am sure that the small buck never would have fallen for me had he not enticed the animal to leave his forest retreat. While touring the San Francisco underworld as the guest of the police vice squad on my recent tour of the Pacific coast, we encountered what the police considered a suspicious party. He was one of those dapper young men with a red necktie that frequent this section of famous Frisco. "What's your occupation?" asked one of the policemen of the young man. "I'm a businessman," was the answer as the young man started to trip blithely away. "Wait a minute," said the cop. "I never saw a businessman walk like that." "Oh," replied the dapper youth, "but you don't know what kind of business I'm in." 30 days for him. During my recent rampage about the American continent, it was my pleasure to appreciate the service of Tijuana, and I could not resist the temptation to contrast this Mexican village with the Canadian metropolis, Montreal. In Montreal, I enjoyed a bottle of Pol Roger champagne without being a lawbreaker, even though it cost me 10 cents for a 2x4 sandwich. From Montreal, I hustled to the deer hunting regions of northern Minnesota and found no champagne or other imported wines, but plenty of Mountain Dew. With all due respect to Mr. Andrew J. Volstead, our Minnesota congressman, there is today, in this grand and glorious land of the free and home of the brave, more rotten booze than it was ever my lot to drink in the pre-prohibition days. But to get back to my deer hunting expedition, I must admit that the deer were scarce, but they were polecats and goosehawks and a four-legged cow, wild bigs and wild boars, and a thing like a sow. There were thousands of screech owls, turkey buzzards, and quail, and a little black jackass with a damnable tail, with their fold-de-dole and fold-de-dole day. While flivering out near Golden Valley, Minnesota, I dropped in at the farm of my own friend John Foss to pass the time of day. I noticed a drove of hogs on his timber lot acting peculiar. They would run up to a tree and squeal like mad, then leave that tree and go to another and do the same thing, continuing in their mad scamper around the timber lot. "What makes them act that way?" I asked John. "Well," replied old man Foss, "last winter I had a throat infection and lost the power of speech for a month or more. Couldn't call them to their feed. So I taught them to come by rapping on a post or a tree. And now the darn woodpeckers are setting them crazy." End of section 1. Section 2 of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922 by W.H. Fawcett. Strippings from the Fawcett, Part 2. At Breezy Point Lodge, I have an old gray mare, and I love to sing this melody of my boyhood days. The old gray mare, she sits on the single tree, sits on the whipple tree, sits on the single tree. And believe me, her greatest indoor and outdoor sport is sitting on the single tree. Up in the deer hunting grounds of northern Minnesota, the Jack Pine savages are still singing that old familiar ditty about the much-maligned bird, the woodpecker. These heart-throbbing words pealed gently through the evening air. "I stuck my finger in a woodpecker's hole, and the woodpecker said, 'Gosh darn your soul, take it out, take it out, take it out, take it out.'" The other day, I was riding on a streetcar in Minneapolis. Sitting opposite me was a very pretty young lady who had a poodle dog on her lap. The blue-nosed lady sitting next to the girl addressed her thusly. "My, what a nasty little dog. Don't you think, my young lady, it would look much nicer if you had a little baby in your lap?" "No," the pretty one replied in calm, even tones. "It wouldn't. You see, I'm not married." Chief Blowburger surveyed a party of hobos coming down the Great Northern Tracks. "Here they come, hog-fat and crummy, short pipes and red noses. Won't work, ain't allowed to shoot 'em, and if you don't feed 'em, they'll burn your barn down." Extra, extra. Ladies and gentlemen, don't fail to be in Robbinsdale next Tuesday at 4 o'clock a.m. to witness the daring feat of Peter, our hired man. This brave, snooze-grinding son of toil will endeavor to dive off the top of the highest building in Robbinsdale into a 6-foot tank of solid concrete, playing the ukulele, eating raw liver, and keeping perfect time. The spectacular dive by Pete will be for a worthy cause. All proceeds from the entertainment will be donated to the starving plumbers of Chicago, admission free. Took my wife into a store to assist her in buying a new hat. Like all women, she tried on nearly every hat in the store. In desperation, the salesman appealed to me with this remark: "How would you like me to try a sailor for your wife?" Having been in the army for many years, I felt like suggesting a soldier for this insulting salesman. Needless to say, the sale was not made. On my recent visit to New York, I had the pleasure of the company of Mr. H.A. Darcy, author of The Face Upon the Floor, which we misnamed in past issues The Face Upon the Barroom Floor. This masterpiece undoubtedly stands first among popular present-day poems, judging from the many requests we received from whiz-bang readers for its republication. To ye editor, Mr. Darcy told the history of how The Face Upon the Floor was inspired. Way back in the early 80s, Union Square in New York was called the Rialto, agreeable to the fact that it was the theatrical center of America. On the corner of 4th Avenue and 14th Street, a very excellent saloon was run by Joe Schmidt, and it was kept fairly full from noon to midnight, with respectable members of the Sock and Buskin and amusement promoters. One Saturday evening in August 1887, A table in front of the bar was occupied by a bunch of managers. We were combing businesses with pleasure, booking time and enjoying the very excellent beer and spirits available in those happy days. It was probably about 11 o'clock when a mendicant shambled in and approached our table. With a sad, husky voice, he said, "Gentlemen, I want a drink." All eyes were turned to the derelict, and someone at the table offered one of the untasted glasses of whiskey, which was quickly swallowed. Joe behind the bar yelled, "Get out!" The waiter in front quickly seized the beggar and threw him out of the swinging door. To make the situation even more dramatic, a rough-haired terrier dog named Toby, in a pet of the saloon, jumped at the poor devil and fastened on his pants. Toby always thought it was his duty to chase poor people, and had an innate antipathy to jumpers, or pants not duly pressed. Well, several of the party got up from the table and went out to see what had happened to the poor wretch. He was lying on the sidewalk with his face halfway in the gutter. Gathered him up, brushed him off a little, wiped his face, and someone went into the saloon and brought out another drink of whiskey. Several coins were carefully dropped into the inside pocket of his coat. This was done surreptitiously so that he would not know the money was there until the tomorrow. As we left him on a doorstep next door, I asked what his trade was, and he managed to tell me he was an artist. I held that this man was not a professional beggar, derelict true, but probably had once been a talented man. The argument was taken up by several other gentlemen in the room and waxed warm until I got angry, and with a curt "good night," bolted out of the saloon. On my way home, I determined to write up the story in such a way as would make my argument good and satisfy Joe Schmidt that I was not wholly chicken-hearted. I also was pretty sure of winning the fair hostess to my way of thinking. As I walked along, I composed in my mind the first two lines. "'Twas a balmy summer evening, and a goodly crowd was there, that well-nigh filled Joe's barroom on the corner of the square." The measure was a happy iambic tetrameter, and fitted the story. Before going to bed, I jotted down the first two lines, which I have always found the hardest to compose. Next day, I finished the story. When Joe read it, I saw tears in his eyes. It was published by the New York Dispatch. Joe bought 100 copies of the paper and sent 25 to the Buffalo Bill Company, who were playing in London, and among whom both he and I had many friends. Cody and Major Burke circulated the copies among their theatrical friends, and before many months, 3 vaudevillians were reciting the poem at the big music halls. And Sam Bernard set America crazy with it, and yet, after over 30 years, it is still a popular act and wins excellent booking. I've been told often that my story set the pace for Prohibition. I sincerely hope not. If I thought that I had helped that unfortunate law, I would walk down to the dock and kick myself into the river. Face Upon the Floor is not a temperance story, but an admonition to the world not to despise the unfortunate derelict. In this issue, we are pleased to publish another poem by Mr. D'Arcy, and have his promise of more to follow. And let me add, I found Mr. D'Arcy a regular fellow, well met, an excellent conversationalist, and a fine reminder of the good old days. Gus, our ex-hired man, escorted a petite young lady to her apartment. Just as I was putting my arm around her, Gus reports, a man walked in. "My gosh, my husband!" exclaimed the girl. "Oh, busy, honey?" the intruder remarked as he walked out. Our new hired man, Ikey, from the cities, is so absent-minded that when he went in the stable to saddle a horse, he was surprised to find, after a half-hour's work, that he had the saddle on himself, and he spent another half-hour in vain trying to climb on his own back. The Wahoo Bird. Ladies and gentlemen, I take great pleasure in presenting to you the Wahoo Bird, the only bird of its kind in captivity today. This strange bird comes from the far-off shores of the Isle of Borneo, where it rears its young among the crannies and crags of the mountainous coastline. Now, the particular strange thing about this bird is that it only mates once every 100 years, and after having mated, it crawls, half drags, half flies, until it gets itself to the topmost pinnacle of the long, tall, lofty rubber tree. Casting its eyes to the heavens, it cries in tones of ecstasy, "Wahoo-wah!" which, translated in the language of the natives, means, My gosh, Mama, ain't love grand? End of section 2. Section 3 of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W.H. Fawcett. Drippings from the Faucet, Part 3. Deciding the race. Pat and Mike were to run a race to a tree by different routes. Pat: if I get there first, I'll make a mark on the tree with this chalk, Mike, and if you get there first, you rub it off. The old boys chatter. A fellow who marries a bow-legged girl these days has no excuse that he can't see what he's getting. He doesn't dress so neat on work days, but he wears his new hat on his weekend. This bends in the middle. Santa Claus played a dirty trick on the bow-legged girls, didn't he? Why? See what he put in their stockings. Another version of it. No matter how pretty a bow-legged girl may be, she is always in bad shape. Did you ever go to the post office to attend the graduation exercises of a correspondence school class? The Charity Bazaar. How much am I offered for this pie? Sang out the auctioneer. 6 bits, one youth bid. Who'll make it 80? Just imagine you get the girl and all. Say, mister, ejaculated the youth, what kind of pie is it you're selling? Shed tears, brothers. Yep, I've quit the hold-up game. I'll hang round joints no more. So with a sigh and a faint little cry, the garter stretched out on the floor. Our monthly maxim. A bell's a bell, even though it is on a cow. Our monthly toast. Or fill up your glasses and fill 'em up full and drink to the health of the pedigreed bowl. Indoor sports. From The Blue Lagoon, a novel. Her ears were small and like little white shells. Pete would take one between finger and thumb and play with it as if it were a toy, pulling at the lobe of it or trying to flatten out the curved part. Her breasts, her shoulders, her knees, her little feet, every bit of her, he would examine and play with and kiss. She would lie and let him, seeming absorbed in some far-away thought, of which he was the object. Then all at once her arms would go round him. All this used to go on in the broad light of day, under the shadow of the R2 leaves, with no one to watch except the bright-eyed birds and the leaves above. Not in Robbinsdale. Hello, is this chief of the fire department? Yeah, this is the chief. Well, my house is on fire. How long has it been burning? Half hour. Did you try putting water on it? Yes, but it won't go out. Then 'tain't no use in us coming over, 'cause that's all we'd do. Goodbye. Women are the greatest addition in the world, and no man should be without a copy. Parlor story. A southern restaurant serves eggs with all meat orders. A patron ordered pork chops. Boss, how do you all want your eggs? Inquired the waiter. Oh, you can eliminate the eggs. The waiter repeated the order to the colored chef and added, eliminate them eggs. The chef scratched his head. Sambo, yo tell dat customer I ain't got no time this morning to eliminate them eggs and that he all will have them cooked some other way. Speaking about atrocities, the occupants of the parlor car of the Limited were startled by the abrupt entrance of 2 masked bandits. Throw up your hands, commanded the bigger of the two. We're gonna rob all the gents and kiss all the gals. No, partner, responded the smaller one gallantly. We'll rob all the gents, but we'll leave the ladies alone. Mind your own business, young fellow, snapped a female passenger of uncertain age. The big man's robbing this train. Pat's practical piety. The ice in the river was thin as Pat started to feel his way across. Every time Pat put down his right foot, he murmured reverently, Praise the Lord. And as the left foot hit the thin ice, the devil ain't such a bad man. The other side of the river, Pat, with a sigh of relief, turned back and said, To hell with bother yez. Useless effort. Paddy Ryan in Ireland inherited a pile of money and decided to tour France. He hired a guide who steered him up a mountain. After a full day's climb, they reached the summit. "See the beautiful valley," said the guide to Paddy, pointing below. "Sure," stormed the Irishman. "If it's so damn beautiful in the valley, what the devil for did you bring me way up here?" And he got it. "You're working too hard," said a policeman to a man who was drilling a hole in his safe at 2 o'clock in the morning. "What do you mean?" asked the burglar in a disconcerted tone. "I mean you need a rest," answered the policeman. "It rang keys, Bo. I met a wonderful girl yesterday afternoon, and she invited me up to her apartment. That night, she told me to stand in front of the door and whistle 3 times, and she would throw down the key. Boys, I never saw so many keys in all my life." I could print a lot of real funny stories, but, well, what's the use? You'd only laugh at them. End of section 3.
Section 4 of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Donald Warren. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W.H. Fawcett. Questions and Answers. Dear Captain Billy, what is the first thing that turns green in the spring? Up in Adam. Christmas jewelry. Dear Captain, my kid brother's a great chicken chaser. He came home late last night all dizzy. Do you think he was drinking? Or what's the matter? I just think he. Swimming in the head. Dear Whiz Bang Bill, is there much food values in dates? On a diet. It all depends on who you make them with. Dear Captain, what is a sly oodle? Nat you list. 'Tis a small weasel that sleeps in the crotch of a tree and swallows its nose to keep it from freezing. Dear Captain Billy, a fellow asked me a funny question the other day. Why is a crow? Seems sort of silly. Do you know the answer? Empty can. That's easy. Cause. Dear Captain Billy, what is a Nabisco? Ray Vaughan. It consists of 2 pieces of tissue paper with a little honey between. Dear Captain Billy, would it hurt me to sleep between 2 windows? I foozle. You would have a pain in the chest and back and a catch on your side. Dear Captain Billy, what is a good name for a new college sorority? L.E. Rat. I felt a thigh. Dear Captain Billy, what is a sculptor? Can't elope. A man that makes faces and busts. Dear Captain Billy, what is dust? Hose at it. Mud with the juice squeezed out. Dear Captain Billy, is hair tonic a good drink? J. Few Brains. Would advise you not to drink hair tonic, as it will raise a mustache on your appendix, and if you should laugh, you would tickle yourself to death. Dear Farmer Bill, please inform me where milk comes from. A city girl. From cow faucets. Dear Captain Billy, if my father was a duke and my mother was a duchess, what would that make me? What's the use? Why, I guess you would be Duke's mixture. Dear Captain, tell me something interesting about Auction Bridge. Adeline Moore. All we know about is Brooklyn Bridge, and that is just one long suspense. Dear Captain, what did my beau mean when he told me he would meet me in the future? Sarah Desert. Probably he meant in the pasture. Dear Captain Billy, what is a dry dock? Torchy. A physician who won't give us prescriptions. End of section 4. Section 5 of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Donald Warren. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W. H. Fawcett. The farm that Bull built. Oh, over the hill to Robbinsdale for a slap on the back and a hearty hail, where the cows do tricks in the new mown hay, and the bull is thrown in a very quaint way, where Gus is tired from morn till night, and the old silo is always tight, where the chickens sing and the roosters crow, and the corn does a hoe down row on row. So up the road to the Whiz farm, where the onions grow but do no harm. It's a merry crowd that slings the hoe on Billy's farm. Come, gang, let's go. They tell me people are so tough in South St. Paul, they play tiddlywinks with the sewer covers. Is that right? Fable of a Poodle. Once there was a guy who wished he was a rich woman's lapdog, when suddenly a great genie appeared before him and granted his wish, telling him that at any time he wished to be changed back to a man, he should slip out of the rich lady's house and come to the home of the genie in a distant part of the city. Being only a dog, he soon grew tired of his pampered life, and since he was really a dog, the kisses and petting of his pretty mistress failed to produce the kick that he had anticipated. So he slipped out of the house and found himself on a broad and spacious avenue lined with trees, telegraph poles, and iron fence posts. Now that was many moons ago, but up to the present writing, the little doggie has not reached the genie's house to be changed back to a man. Moral? It's a poor wish that won't work two ways. French Proverbs, selected by Reverend G.L. Morrill. Women give themselves to God when the devil wants nothing more to do with them. Since Cupid is represented with a torch in his hand, why did they place virtue on a barrel of gunpowder? A woman forgives everything but the fact that you do not covet her. Fools never understand people of wit. Outside the show. Hello, Bill. How did you enjoy the show last night? Fine, Joe. Wasn't that some pippin in the bathing suit? Yep, Bill. Well, I saw her without the suit on today. Street clothes? Familiarity breeds contempt. John Philip Sousa traveled 6,000 miles to hear the celebrated chimes of an English church. As he was drawing near the place, the wonderful chimes rang out, and enraptured Sousa exclaimed to the driver of the vehicle, "You folks are indeed fortunate to live within the sound of these heavenly chimes." "I can't hear a word you say," shouted the driver irritably. "Them damn bells deafen me." As you were. Sexton. Dogs are not allowed here, sir. Visitor. That's not my dog. Sexton. Not your dog. Why's he following you? Visitor. Well, so are you. We pull lots of these. A cross-eyed man at a dance hall said, "May I have the next dance, please?" Two girls answered as with one voice, "With pleasure." That reminds me. Algernon. Dearest, I could sit here forever gazing into your charming eyes and listening to the wash of the ocean. The girl. That reminds me, honey. I have a laundry bill and I'm dead broke. There's one thing I can't eat for breakfast, and that is supper. While a darky was being led to the gallows, a crowd of people ran past him. "What you running fo'?" yelled Sambo after them. "There ain't nothing gwine to happen till I gets there." He is so stingy, he goes to the post office to fill his fountain pen. April Fool. Johnny, running into the room of his mother on April 1st. "Mama, there's a strange man kissing our maid." Mother. "What, a strange man?" Johnny. April Fool, it's only Papa. Curbstone Comedy. He stopped the bulky car. "Honey, I must get out and spank the engine over the ears." "Oh, engine ears." We pass. The nurse at the front regarded the wounded soldier with a puzzled look. "Your face is familiar to me, but I can't place you," she said. "Let bygones be bygones, baby," replied the soldier. "I used to be a policeman." Riddle-de-doot. "Where did you get that rose?" "That isn't a rose, that's a geranium." "No, it isn't. It's a rose." "I said it's a geranium." "How do you spell it?" "It's a rose, all right." My girl has Pullman teeth, one upper and one lower. Colorado Springs is sure some town. Had to go up to the city hall to get a permit from the mayor to play a game of dominoes. This washboard is 100 years old. Yes, it surely is wrinkled. Punctuation. Men are naturally grammatical. Yes? When they see an abbreviated skirt, they always look after it for a period. Chalk up one error. Chicago. Mrs. R. Kelly sat watching a thrilling movie. Without taking her eyes off the film, she landed an uppercut on the jaw of the man sitting next to her. I must have made a mistake, Jake Cohn told the judge. I didn't know I put my hand on her knee. Remember this one? The first scene is that of a gambler who has lost all his money at play, takes his dead mother's ring from her finger, which she wore on her wedding day. His last earthly treasure, he stakes it, bows his head to shame he may hide. When they raised up his head, they found he was dead. 'Tis a picture from life's other side. Say, Mr. Jones, what do you want to get married for? Because I don't want my name to die out. You don't love me any more, she sobbed and bowed her head. What the hell's the difference? The villainous rascal said. A cat, mistaking a ball of wool for a meatball, swallowed it, and sure enough, when she had kittens, they had on sweaters. Child's is a great place to eat. Went in there yesterday, and amongst the dirty dishes on the table, I found 30 cents. End of section 5. Section 6 of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Donald Warren. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W.H. Fawcett. Movie Hot Stuff. These be dull days in the movie and even the stage world. The dark clouds of the Arbuckle case still hang over the two arts, thanks to the obdurate lady juror who caused a disagreement in the San Francisco trial. The pleasantly informal old days, when Wally Reed could run up to Frisco and pelt eggs upon pedestrians from the 14th floor of the St. Francis Hotel, are long past. One simply has to be circumspect these days. After Whiz Bang's comments upon the way the New York stage was getting away with salaciousness came a police investigation of the demi-virgin, the gentle whimsy with the strip poker game. The farce was severely condemned by the police commissioner, but it is still running and to crowded houses. The risque plays had had 1 or 2 editions since we wrote last. For instance, there's David Belasco's adaptation of the French farce Kiki, with a little gutter garment of the French music hall as its heroine. Mr. Belasco has substituted the word marriage for liaison throughout, but the intent is there. And the lines, oh boy, once Kiki remarks, "The men are like cats. They follows us as though our veins were full of catnip." Then there's a whole act in which Kiki, posing as a rigid somnambulist, is carried and tossed about by the various members of the cast, all the time dressed only in a simple pair of open work pajamas. We aren't intimidating that Kiki isn't entertaining. It is, but the latitude to get away with. Meanwhile, the censors go on cutting out bathing girls from our films and making sure there's no indication ever shown that babies are born. Charlie Ray, spats, cane, trick overcoat with his fur collar et al., has been making his first visit to New York and not creating a ripple of interest. Of course, friend wife was along. We saw Ray strolling up Fifth Avenue the other day, and nobody knew the ornate pedestrian as the simple country boy of the films. They tell me that Ray takes himself very seriously and left the cynical New York reporters dizzy with his confessions about his mission in life. Jack Pickford continues to loiter about New York. There are all sorts of rumors linking Jack up with pretty Marilyn Miller or the Follies. Marilyn lost her husband, Frank Carter, in an auto accident some time ago, and is as pleasant a little widow as the White Lights possesses. Maybe Marilyn has an eye toward the screen. By the way, those reports of an impending family event in the Fairbanks family still persist. What could be nicer? Poor Eric von Stroheim. We sympathize with him despite his junker physiognomy. He is telling sad tales of his treatment at the hands of Universal. After finishing Foolish Wives, they took the negative away from him, hired somebody or other to cut it, and Eric came on to New York to find out where he stood. At last reports, he is still trying to find out. Overheard him in a hotel recently telling his troubles. Now and then a tear splashed in the soup. You see, they have taken his brainchild, his masterpiece, away and are letting some cruel, inartistic outsider cut it any old way. It seems that Carl Laemmle, Prexy of Universal, became irate over the way Foolish Wives cost money and never seemed to finish. Eric says they put all sorts of obstructions in his way. They locked cutting room doors, held up his pet plans, and all that, according to Eric, finally, whisper, for it may only be a pipe dream. Eric organized and armed his army of extras after the fashion of Mr. William Hohenzollern and presented an ultimatum. He got what he wanted. Paused to consider the news story that nearly came out of Universal. Suppose Eric had cut the communication wires, tried military gas on the officials, and made the studio into an armed camp. It sounds fishy, of course, but have you ever met the tense Mr. von Stroheim? At that we feel awfully sorry for him. He has unusual directorial ability, and he is, or was, the one able person at Universal. And now, after making Foolish Wives, which if it doesn't get barred by the censors, ought to be a whirlwind, he seems to be getting the gate. Aren't those morality clauses the high-minded movie producers are inserting into their actor contracts the bunk? Imagine the nerve. Will Rogers gave the best summary when he declared, say, if anyone hands me a contract with one of them clauses, I'll say, you sign it first. He is in New York doing a turn on the Ziegfeld roof. The best line of his act is, I'm the only guy who ever went to California and came back with the same wife. One of the funniest kickbacks from the Arbuckle case occurred at Vitagraph, where they had Macklin Arbuckle, no relation to Fatty, under contract to be co-starred in The Prodigal Judge, which he had played for years on the stage. Just as the picture was completed, a little San Francisco scandal broke. Vitagraph decided that it couldn't afford to feature Mr. Macklin Arbuckle at this time. This despite the fact that Mr. Macklin was a well-known star before Fatty was ever heard of. But luckily, he had a sense of humor, so he said, oh well, maybe it wasn't exactly that. You can't buck such reasoning and let his name go into tiny type. Very well. I said she had made me with a hit. Very well. Perhaps I was a trifle lit. Very well. I told her that she was divine. She let me hold her hand in mine. In short, I handed out my line. Very well. I whispered softly in her ear. Very well. 'Twas how appropriately, dear. Very well. I drew her snugly to my breast, while she, not daring to protest, cleaned out the pockets of my vest. Very well. A tough steak. Cannibal number 1. What makes the chief such a bunk spreader? Cannibal number 2. He just ate the editor of Whiz Bang. Nah. Is my wife forward? Asked the passenger on the limited. She wasn't to me, sir, answered the conductor politely. Whiz Bang editorials. The bull is mightier than the bullet. Hats off to a real man of the cloth. The Reverend D.H. Jones has resigned the pulpit of Huntington Park, California Baptist Church because of the fanatical attempts of his flock to enforce Sunday closing. I prefer to dwell with the worldling and be true to my inner self than to live with the saint and betray it, Reverend Jones says. There's a way to make the church the super attraction, but it will never be done by coercing the consciences of men. The cross of Christ is proving to be the greatest magnet in the world, but use it as a club and it will become a colossal failure. Killed professionally? Yes, but frankly, I would rather be a man than a minister. Character is greater than profession. I would just as soon believe that the perfume of the rose comes from the polecat as to believe that the spirit of the blue laws come from God. Christ whipped men out of the church, but never into it. Professional reformers and Christian lobbyists at Washington may mean well, but most of them are misguided, swivel chair heroes of the cross. "Close every door except the churches," cries the reformer, forgetting that open hearts are greater inducements than closed doors. The doctrine behind the blue laws is this: I am in the right and you are in the wrong. When you are stronger than I, you ought to tolerate, for it is your duty to tolerate truth. But when I am the stronger, I shall persecute you, for it is my duty to persecute error. All the proposed Sunday legislation is simply a human attempt to whitewash what God designed to wash white. To condemn movies because some things may be objectionable is like refusing to eat fish because it contains bones. When human passion is subdued, when the turbulent tide ebbs, we see that the big thing that lies at the bottom of the opposition of theater opening on Sunday is simply bigotry. It is a wonder to me how many bad things good people see in the movies. Fortunately, if you are so disposed, you need never be disappointed. The product of a legal religion has ever been and ever will be either hypocrisy or persecution. A little white coffin rested on a small table, covered with flowers white as the waxen face and fair hair of the baby child whose short life of 13 months suffering was ended. A small company of kind neighbors was present. The clergyman repeated the Saviour's words, "Suffer the children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven," and told how the little life had not paid in dollars and cents, but that judged by an immortal existence, begun here and to last forever, death was gain. After the fathers, sisters, and brothers said goodbye, the mother took the last farewell kiss of her baby and baptized it anew with her hot falling tears. So small was the casket that the undertaker lifted it in his arms, just as the mother had the sick child, and carried it to the carriage and placed it on the seat. We entered the beautiful green cemetery and lowered the little flower-decked coffin into the grave to rest until God's good morning in the graveless, griefless home of heaven. As I looked back, the mound seemed so small that a child could step over it in his play, but I knew it was higher than the mountaintop to the mother, because in it was buried all her love and hope. So we left the little casket and the little body in the little grave, feeling that this bud of promise would be transplanted to the eternal garden where the full flower would blossom and bloom without decay. The Detroit Free Press calls it the Snoopers Brigade, and we are inclined to think that it is a well-fitting title for the aggregation of people who are urging the formation of a society that would compel all men to be spies upon neighbors and reporters upon their actions. Some time ago, a federal prohibition commissioner announced plans for such an association, but he immediately discovered that the people of the United States are not ready to become investigators of their neighbors' conduct in any particular, and the project was squelched by higher authority. The courts of the country are, very generally, excluding testimony obtained by men who lead others into the commission of crime, and properly, they regard such actions as a conspiracy to break the law, which makes the tempter a partner in the crime. In a Mississippi case, where it appeared that a peace officer induced a man to purchase liquor for him, and then arrested the man who succumbed to his blandishments, the judge ordered the accused discharged, and the officer held. The official was subsequently convicted of his part in the crime, and the Supreme Court sustained the verdict against him. There is a very general misapprehension on the subject, and acts of the officials have been winked at because the public really did not know what was going on and did not realize the extent of the practice indulged in by what are very generally called stool pigeons. The laws of this or any other state may be enforced without making all the people detectives, as the Snoopers League would have them, or without permitting the practice of certain classes of officials who sometimes literally hire men to commit a crime in order that that very crime may be suppressed. Where did I get my education? Why, me dad used to take me over his knee. He made me smart. Bully for the Chicago Tribune. That journal slips the prong into blue-nosed crafts in a recent issue. It is beginning to appear that the movement led by Mr. Crafts is as bigoted and as savage in its purpose as those which we thought were buried in this semi-barbarous past. It must be held that no human uplift but maniacal desire to inflict physical punishment is the motive. Mr. Crafts and his followers wish to put as many of their fellow countrymen as possible in jail, and they are trying to wreck this republic in order to do so. Farmyard notes. Chickens get tough when they run around too much. Be it ever so humble, there is no flower like the collie. A bird in the oven is worth two in the bush, and a berry in the bush is not worth two in the hand. I wish I was cross-eyed, then I could stand on a windy day and gaze at a lady wearing a short skirt right in the eye and still have a guilty conscience. Cellar ancestry. The potato's eyes were full of tears, and the cabbage hung its head, for there was grief in the cellar that night, for the vinegar's mother was dead. You can lead a cow to water, but the bull, he must be heard. As it is in New York. On East Houston Street is the lasagna or ravioli belt, where the gay boys from out of town take the leading ladies of their jobber plants out for a wild evening, writes O.O. McIntyre. You know, the gay out-of-town man. He carries a patent cigar lighter and has a sterling silver monogram belt buckle and, oh yes, a handkerchief with a purple border. His eyes are blue, and he wrinkles them in a merry twinkle. At least he thinks it's a merry twinkle, but it's just the sap oozing out. The leading lady knows Broadway because she reads Broadway brevities, and her theory of life in the abstract is that ladies must live. After the first quart of red ink, he whispers a story the boys told him in front of the Bon-Ton store before he left for the East. She pulls the two-gun, hair-trigger Billhart stuff and says, "Naughty man." To complete the evening and display the ultimate in savoir-faire, he calls loudly to the waiter, "L'audition, s'il vous plaît, garçon." They ride to one of the oranges in a quick-firing metered taxi, and he returns to the McAlpin to write the wife and kiddies of his lonesomeness. New York. This is the old famous New York poem, credited to a former collector of the port as author, but denied. However, you'll find note that every word carries a wallop, and so we herewith, with your kind permission, republish it. Vulgar of manner, overfed, overdressed, and underbred, heartless, godless, hell's delight, rude by day, lewd by night, bedwarfed the man, enlarged the brute, ruled by Jew and prostitute, purple-robed and pauper-clad, raving, rioting, money-mad, a squirming herd of mammon's mesh, a wilderness of human flesh, crazed by avarice, lust, and rum, New York, thy name's delirium. Farm life. I see you are keeping your hired man all right now, Ezra. Yep, keeping him all right. He seems satisfied, too. How'd you do it? Did everything he asked me to. Let him work only 4 hours and eat with the family. He got to complaining of dull evenings, so every night I give him the use of a car of his own and the money to spend to go to the movies in town. That ought to satisfy him. It didn't, though. He complained of his room, and so I coaxed my son to trade rooms with him, and he seemed more settled-like. I noticed you cut off your whiskers, Ezra. Yeah, some more of that hired man's notions. How's that? He complained they tickled him every time I kissed him good night. Wah, wah. Golly Moses, they got strawberries and cherries and all kind of fruit covered with candy. What kind shall I get? Get a chocolate-covered watermelon. Sick 'em, Tig. What you need is a tonic to sharpen your appetite, said the doctor. By the way, what is your occupation? I am a sword swallower in a circus sideshow, replied the caller. Little Joe says, they am just as many sevens on the dice as anything else, only they is bashful. End of section 6. Section 7 of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Donald Warren. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W.H. Fawcett. Smokehouse Poetry, Part 1. The greatest poem of the squared circle ever brought to light is in store for March whiz-bang readers. The Kid's Last Fight. That noted recitation of years ago has been obtained by the whiz-bang. Reset the verse, and will hold the boards in the March issue. The way he staggered made me sick. I stalled. McGee yelled, "Cop him quick." The crowd was wise in yellin', "Fake." They'd seen the chance I wouldn't take. Shy Slim twangs his bloomin' lyre by J. Eugene Chrisman, author of Poppies, written exclusively for Captain Willie's Whiz-Bang. By the lakefront near Chicago with her elbows on her knee, there's a widder woman waiting, and I know she waits for me. When the wind is from the stockyards, every odor seems to say, "Come you back, you lost star boarder. Come you back, you skunk, and pay." Her apron, it was greasy, and her hair it hung in strings, and her name was Sarah Lukens, but it had been lots of things. When I saw her first a-diggin' up the makins for a stew, and she wasn't wastin' nothin' that a dog could chaw on too. Blinkin' rough for me to lead, toothless, shallow, and knock-kneed, wasn't carin' much for class, though. What I needed was a feed. When the bunch had grabbed their hand out, and we had 'em on the go, then she'd start me for Dutch Ryans with a 2-bit piece to throw, with her head upon my shoulder and the second growler full. She was lonesome, Bo, that widder with the rough stuff that she'd pull. How I used to feed her full of the mush talk and the bull, but the snow had begun blowin', and I didn't like to pull. But that's all put behind me, long ago and far away, since I hit out for St. Louis one night on the C&A. But they're tellin' in the jungles that the winter's one best bet for a young man and handsome hobo is to be a widder's pet. Oh, them boardin' kitchen smells, and she fed me jams and gels, and the cuts of suds from Ryan's. I won't ever need naught else. Ship me somewhere south of Shy, though where the bloomin' mob ain't cursed, with a Volstead disposition, and a man can quench his thirst, where the winter snows are falling, and it's there that I would be, either Juarez or Havana, with a widder on my knee. Charlie Wong. Copyright, by permission of the author, Green Room Club, New York, by H.A. D'Arcy. The West was pretty wild when Bill Durant and I went out. 'Twere in 59 or 60, somewhere that about. Bill took his pretty wife along. They'd been wed about a year. A buxom kind of girl she war, that never thought o' fear. And I don't know what she needed to, for the miners, one and all, would have fought for her like devils if she'd ever made the call. And afore we'd fairly built a hut to keep her from the damp, a little baby gal was born, the first one in the camp. And didn't the boys keep Christmas? Well, I'm shoutin' now they did. Why, they all got roarin' full that night, just in honor o' the kid. And by the time that baby were a little tot o' 3 years old, she had a big tomato can just filled with virgin gold. I built a cabin about a quarter-mile away from Bill's, so we both had kinder cozy homes, protected by the hills. And Charlie Wong, the Chinaman, had open handy by the laundry o' the canyon, and he washed for Bill and I. Now Chinamen ain't liked too well, and one day in a row, Charlie got pretty badly used. I disremember now just what the trouble war about, but Bill war in the fray, and he helped to beat the Chinaman in a rather brutal way. Durant weren't bad at heart, you know, but like too many others, he didn't like Mongolians, nor own 'em, men and brothers. And I often heard him say that if the Chinaman were near, he'd cut the leper's pigtail off and stick it through his ear. One evening Lizzie, Durant's wife, and little Tot the child, were coming homeward down the hills, when all at once a wild and fearful howl were heard behind. 2 wolves were in their track. Liz says she stopped and grabbed the child and threw it on her back. Then shrieking aloud for help, she ran as swiftly as any hind toward the Chinese laundry hut. The wolves came fast behind. Nearer and nearer on they came. Then reaching Charlie's door, the mother with her precious load fell prone upon the floor. Bill and I were talking when we heard the fearful cries, and rushing to the laundry, the sight that met our eyes was far too horrible to tell, for thar was Charlie Wong, dead and blood-stained, knife in hand, full 15 inches long. He'd fought a fearful battle, one brute were by his side, with its entrails all hanging out, and blood-stains on its hide, but the other got its work in afore Bill and I got there, and were gnawing Charlie's throat and face till the bones were laying bare. Well, we made quick work o' Mr. Wolf. We filled 'em full of lead, then gathered child and mother up and took 'em home to bed. Next day, when Lizzie told her tale, Bill's eyes were full of tears. He didn't brag much sentiment, and hadn't wept for years. Poor Washy, when we packed him up, the camp boys stood around, each one with hat in hand, and tearful eyes cast on the ground. We shipped the corpse to Frisco, with a bag of the yellow dust, to pay the freight to Peking, to rest in peace, I trust. But ever after that, if any man had got the face to say Chinese were yellow dogs, he'd better quit the place, for thar ain't a name more holy held in Canyon Idlewild than Charlie Wong, the Chinaman, that saved Bill's wife and child. End of section 7. Section 8 of Captain Billy's Whiz-Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Donald Warren. Captain Billy's Whiz-Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W. H. Fawcett, Smokehouse Poetry, Part 2. A horsefly eats whip crackers. The Song of Camille. Sitting alone by my window, watching the moonlit street, bending my head to listen to the well-known sound of your feet, I have been wondering, darling, how I can bear the pain when I watch with sighs and tear-wet eyes and wait for your coming in vain. For I know the day approaches when your heart will tire of me, when by door and gate I must watch and wait for a form I shall not see. For the love that is now my heaven, the kisses that make my life, you will bestow on another, and that other will be your wife. You will grow weary of sinning, though you do not call it so. You will long for a love that is purer than the love that we two know. God knows I love you dearly, with a passion strong as true, but you will grow tired and leave me, though I gave up all for you. I was pure as the morning when I first looked on your face. I knew I could never reach you in your high exalted place, but I looked and loved and worshipped as a flower might worship a star, and your eyes shone down upon me, and you seemed so far, so far. And then, well, you loved me with all your heart, but we could not stand at the altar, we were so far apart. If a star should wed with a flower, the star must drop from the sky, or the flower, in trying to reach it, would droop on its stem and die. But you said that you loved me, darling, and swore by the heavens above that the Lord and all of his angels would sanction and bless our love. And I was weak, not wicked. My love was as pure as true, and sin itself seemed a virtue, if only shared by you. We have been happy together, though under the cloud of sin, but I know that the day approaches when my chastening must begin. You seem to think kindly of me, but you seem downhearted and blue. but you will not always be, and I think I had better leave you. I know my beauty is fading, sin furrows the fairest brow, and I know your heart will weary on the face you smile on now. You will take a bride on your bosom. After you turn from me, you will sit with your wife in the moonlight and hold your babe on your knee. Oh, God, I could not bear it. I would my brain, I know, and while you love me dearly, I think I had better go. It is sweeter to feel, my darling, and now, as I fall asleep, that some would mourn me and miss me, that someone was left to weep. Though to die as I should in the future, to drop in the streets some day, unknown, unwept, and forgotten, after you pass me away, perhaps the blood of the Saviour can wash my garments clean. Perchance I may drift on the water that flows into pastures green. Perchance we may meet in heaven and walk in the street above, with nothing to grieve us or part us, since our sinning was all through love. God says, love one another, and down to the depths of hell, well, he sent the soul of a woman because she loved and fell. And so in the moonlight he found her, or found her beautiful clay, lifeless and pallid as marble, for the spirit had flown away. The farewell words she had written, she held to her cold white breast, and the buried blade of a dagger told how she had gone to rest. To a Mountain Rat, by Frank B. Lindeman. Yes, I reckon God made ye. He's blamed for rattlesnakes, and porcupines and woodchucks, and if they ain't mistakes, you're a crowning example of carelessness divine to nigh the danger line. Your winkless eye in innocence hides cunning cussedness, and your skin is full to bustin' with a longing to possess all things that don't belong to you. But when all's said and done, there's things on earth ye failed to steal, and reputations won. The real John Barleycorn of older days is gone, but not forgotten. Those of us who knew him best and loved him most stuck with him till the last drop. Pretty, looking over the new theater downtown. What do you think of the excavation? Witty. Oh, it's pretty good as a whole. The Bum and the Farmer's Son. One fine day in the month of May, a dirty old bum came hiking. He sat down by a pig pen, which was very much to his liking. On the very same day in the month of May, a farmer's son came piping. Said the bum to the son, "If you'll only come, I will show you things to your liking. I will show you the bees and the cigarette trees, and the gumdrop heights where they give away kites, and the big rock candy mountains, and the lemon springs where the bluebird sings, and marbles made of crystal. You can whiff the breeze from the mince pie trees where the wind blows fine and frisky, and you can join the band of Rocky Mountain Sam and get yourself a sword and a pistol." The farmer's son then went along, listening to the bum's merry song, and for 6 months they did travel. Said the bum to the son, "When I get done, you're going to be a little devil." The punk looked up with his big blue eyes, and he said to Sandy, "Now we've been hiking all day long. Now gosh darn, where's your candy? You put a brace on my leg and showed me how to beg, and you told me you were my jocker, and you told me lies when you promised me pies, and you called me an apple knocker. I'm a-going back home, no more to roam. I'm packing my junkerino. You can bet your lid that this Hoosier kid won't be any bum's punkerino." Misplaced eyebrow. There's a hair in my soup. Diplomatic waiter. Probably out of your mustache. I never thought of that. Clap, clap, clap. Hurry. How do you like the Volstead Act? I never did care for vaudeville. Oh, the merry bells of Windsor. Johnny was late at school and explained that a wedding at his house was the cause of the delay. "That's nice," replied teacher. "Who gave the bride away?" "Well," Johnny replied, "I could have, but I kept my mouth shut." The barbed wire hairnet. Her has gone, her has went, her has left I all alone. Can her never come to me? Must be always go to she? It can never was. Some parties, ahoy! I suppose your wife was tickled to death at your raise in salary. She will be. Haven't you told her yet? No. I thought I would enjoy myself for a couple of weeks first. Isaac Goldstein came home one evening unexpectedly and found a man sitting on his wife's lap. Next day he told his business partner about it. His partner asked Mr. Goldstein what he had said to the man. Goldstein replied, I didn't even speak to him. He was a stranger. End of section 8.
Section 9 of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W. H. Fawcett. Section 9. Pasture Pot Pourri. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. If you don't like my figure, keep your hands off my shoulders. Finishing touches. It's no use, said Alvy. We can't go tonight. And he hung up the receiver while the flaky flakes fell on the grass outside. Jewish bees. Business. I'm through, cried Pedro, as he glanced over the whiz-bang winter annual. Tar baby. I once knew a girl who was so modest that she wouldn't even do improper fractions. Down in dreamy Honolulu. If I was a man in the land of orange and fig, I would sit with my thingamabob and play on my thingamajig. Longfellow. A tramp sat in the doorway of the boxcar, his feet dragging on the floor. Strike 3. There are fools who kiss and tell, thus it is the poet sings, but that is why so many girls are sporting wedding rings. She crept up to the scales like an Arab, and silently stole away. Motto for poets. If at first you don't succeed, keep on sucking till you do succeed. Mr. Martin of Martin's Ferry protests against us writing our jokes on tissue paper so that our Philadelphia friend could see through them. Terrible, remarks Mr. Martin. They are all roses, but some of them are pretty wild. Will be dedicated by request. What care we for Mary's lamb, now he's long been to sleep? We'd rather see her pretty calves than those old pesky sheep. The cold weather chills me to the bone. You should wear a hat. Vengeance at last. Suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone were scrapping, slapping, rapping all the poets who write apologies to Poe just outside my chamber door. Old Ben Joe chewed slippery Elam all the dern day long. A tough break. Had a great tip on a horse yesterday called Cigarette, but I didn't have enough tobacco. Daddy. I love them all. Please take me in swimmin' with bow-legged women, for I love them all. They sure soak you here, Gus remarked as he paid for a Turkish bath. How hoarse are you this morning? Yes, my husband got home very late last night. My wife and I have been holding hands for 12 years. If we ever let go, we'll kill one another. My bride is a nice girl, but she sleeps with her knees up, and the draft gives me a cold. I'd like to see something in a ladies' combination. So would I. We found these woids. Why, honey, I love you with an equatorial passion that no adding machine can register. Oregon gal. There she goes, on her toes, all dressed up in her Sunday clothes. Ain't she neat? Ain't she sweet? She has brand new stockings and nice big clumsy feet. There are a lot of towns in this country that don't bury their dead. They just let 'em walk around. Mr. and Mrs. Fish wish to announce the arrival of a couple of bouncing minnows. Musicians have an easy job. While they're at work, they're only playing. I asked the boy across from my farm what he got for planting potatoes. He said, "I don't get nothing when I do, but I get hell when I don't." I got a fellow so drunk last night that it took 3 bellboys to put me to bed. Wanted, man to drive. Must bring hammer and nails. Hey, Eddie. Eddie was great at a party. In fact, you couldn't have a party without him. He was a great mixer. Here it is again, enlarged. "Oh, scissors, let us cut up. Would Gillette me?" "I've come to the end of my rope," our hero cried as he threw his cigar away. He mixed his beans with honey. He'd done it all his life. 'Twas not because he liked the taste, but it held them on his knife. Teddy's teachings. Get the habit, like the rabbit, multiply. Let us all join in singing that timely melody. Keep her picture in your watch, and you'll love her in time. Going up. He started life as a chiropodist and worked his way up to be a throat specialist. Don't always stand on the same side of the pulpit. You'll wear a hole in the carpet. Here's to the girl that I kissed last, who doesn't kiss slow and doesn't kiss fast, with lips like a ruby and cheeks like a rose. How many have kissed her, God only knows. I am the king of Siam. Yes, I am. He left the light burning so he could see to go asleep. End of chapter 9. Section 10 of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W. H. Fawcett, Section 10. Oh, the moon shines bright. Look out, lips, look out, gums, look out, tummy, here she comes. Kentucky College. Bring on the moon, ring the bell, near beer, S-O-L. The funniest thing I ever saw was a cross-eyed woman telling her hump-backed husband to walk straight home. Mrs. Murphy asked for a nutcracker, and her husband gave her a beer bottle. The 1922 girl. I should worry, I should care, I should marry a millionaire. If he should die, I should cry, I should marry my regular guy. A little song entitled Oil by Myself by John D. She's a wonderful girl. She can keep a secret in 4 different languages. There is no difference between me and the prohibition agent. We're both after the same thing. The moral of A Dog's Tale is that it invariably points to the past. Wriggle through this one. We have a terrible lot to be thankful for. Now Prohibition's here. They've taken away our whiskey, wines, and lager beer. They'll take away our tobacco next, along with the demon rum. We'll have a deuce of a lot to be thankful for if they leave us chewing gum. How do you get that way? A Jewish sergeant at Camp Lee in 1918 was explaining to a rookie the command, mark time, in the following manner. First you raise your right foot 6 inches in the air, and then bring the left foot alongside the right one. Lovely day, don't you think? Said the man as he hit his thumb with a hammer. 2 Swedes went to Ireland to kiss the Blarney Stone, but they couldn't catch their lutefisk where the river Shannon flows. Willie, your face has changed quite a bit. Yes, mother dear, I've been washing it. A change of wives oft-times improves one's disposition. Consolation. Who is that terrible-looking woman? That's my sister. Oh, that's all right. You ought to see mine. Dope this one. After Theophily returned to the city, he wrote to Farmer Cy Hopkins concerning a question which has been puzzling him for some time. Why, he inscribed, do you lock up that donkey of yours so carefully every night? In due course of time came Farmer Hopkins' reply, because it is too good and blank. Hiawatha skinned a squirrel. Hiawatha skinned the squirrel, just sat down and went and skinned it to a finish. From its skin he made some mittens, made them with the outside inside, made them with the inside outside, made them with the fur side inside, made them with the skin side outside, made them with the warm side inside, made them with the cold side outside. Had he placed the fur side outside? Had he placed the skin side inside? Had he placed the outside inside, and the inside inside? Then the warm side would have been outside, and the cold side inside. So to get the fur side, warm side inside, place the skin side inside outside. Now you know why Hiawatha placed the outside, fur side, warm side, inside, and the inside, skin side, cold side, outside. For when the one great scorer comes to write against your name, he writes not that you won or lost, but how you played the game. They don't look natural, said the man, as he rolled 2 3s. How come? Tom. Where have you been for the last 3 hours? Bill. In the saloon, talking to the bartender. Tom. What did he say? Bill. No. Quick, gents. At 16, risque, like a naughty joke. At 17, blasé, tries to learn to smoke. At 18, mildish, jolly just the same. At 19, childish, getting rather tame. At 20, breezy, merely debonair. At 21, uneasy, so rebobs her hair. But when she reaches 22, her rush turns to a shove, for then her motto has become, love and let love. Wanted, man with ugly face to frighten children that play in my yard. He calls this poetry. He's got a swell noodle, our friend Ted. He wears an 8 1/2 hat for a 6 1/2 head. Dusting off the old ones. Man went into German butcher shop and asked price of pork chops. To the reply of 30 cents a pound, he remonstrated that the butcher across the street asked only 20 cents. Why don't you buy them there, then? Asked the German. I would, but he's out, said the customer. Oh, well, when I'm out, I sell 'em for only 10 cents a pound. Eh, Maggie? Here lie the bones of Peter Blunt, down in this mothering nook. Alas, he was too small a runt to argue with a cook. Warm stuff. My wife made it hot for me this morning. How was that? I insisted on her getting up to build the fire. My advice. If you should marry a hooch-hound, I'll tell you what to do. Get a leaky boat and send afloat, and paddle your own canoe. Chicago Tribune's column from the Charles City, Iowa Press. Manager Waterhouse, the movie man, who insists on giving his lady patrons the best, is improving the theater by renovating and decorating the ladies' parlor and lobby, and ladies can, at least, feel that everything is fresh and orderly. End of section 10.
Section 11 of Captain Billy Whizbang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by oogiesragdoll. Captain Billy's Whizbang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W. H. Fawcett. Classified ads. This suits me. From the Spokane Spokesman Review. Young man, industrious, wants to meet lady with enough cash to have her chimney swept. Dan Vall. What you got? From Richmond, Virginia Times Dispatch. Have 4 daughters. Would like to put them in a business of their own. What have you got to offer? P.O. Box 1092, City. And everything. From Duluth Herald. I got 10 acre of fine green timber that I like for to sell on Miller Trunk Highway near Duluth. It bane used fat you want for a good place to build cabin and have old time, hunt yak rabbit and everything. I like for to go back to Norway and will sell very sheep. Write Lars Bogensen, 1302 East 8th Street. Ain't we got fun? From the Aberdeen World. Wanted, girl or lady to stay with me nights, room rent free. A-26, care of World. The Wild and Woolly West, from Casper, Wyoming Herald. To whom it may concern. In justice to my husband, to quiet a few rumors to the effect that he had been beating me up during our recent family trouble, is absolutely untrue. Signed, Mrs. Bessie Peters. Jonah came from the whale with an awful cough. The Busted Air Hose. An Italian was selling plaster of Paris busts of great personages on the streets in New York. His cry was, Garibaldi, the greater man in Italy. George Wash, the greater man in United States. 10 centa each. An American, thinking to have some fun with him, took one of his busts of Garibaldi, dropped it on the pavement, and said, To hell with your Garibaldi. The wop, not to be outdone, took one of his statues of Washington, threw it on the sidewalk, and said, To hell with your Georgia Wash. That oughta cool it. Jerry recently took Gwendolyn for a ride in his new car and returned rather late. Approaching a steep hill, he stopped the car, got out, and raised the hood. What's the matter now? Asked Gwen. I must cool the engine before I try to make that hill, replied Jerry. Oh, goodness alive, said Gwen. It is getting so awfully late. Why don't you strip the gears? Tweet, tweet. I never spoke a cross word to my wife but once. Quite remarkable, that. Not so very. See that scar? How we do it. A witty political candidate, after making a speech in an agricultural district, announced that he would be glad to answer any question that might be put to him. A voice from the audience. You seem to know a lot about a farmer's difficulties. May I ask you a question about a momentous one? Certainly, replied the candidate, nervously. How can you tell a bad egg? Went on the merciless voice. The candidate waited until the laughter had died down, then replied, If I had anything to tell a bad egg, I think I should break it gently. He won the place. April Fool! It was only an old beer bottle floating across the foam. Just an old beer bottle far away from home. Only an old beer bottle with these sad words written on. Whoever finds this beer bottle will find that the beer's all gone. Another married chestnut. I had a queer dream last night, my dear. I thought I saw another man running off with you. What did you say to him? I asked him what he was running for. For men only. When you play poker, you take a chance. When you marry, you have no chance. Maids want nothing but husbands. After that, they want everything. Most of the women who cry at weddings have been married themselves. Our carpenter hero, he hammered on the door, was answered by a girl who wore a white sash and asked if he could get a square meal. He saw that the place was plain, but clean, and planking himself down to the table, he braced his legs beneath the chair and bit into a Parker House roll. His nails were rather dirty, but he met the stares of those about him with a level glance. After bolting his food, he shingled off a dollar bill, paid the girl, opining that it was a good place to board. The tenants who formerly lived on the floor above said that our baby bawled them out. "Hi," say Chappie. "Mais belle," coquettishly. "You tickle me, Duke." The Duke. "My word, what a strange request." Action versus words. Have you ever, after an evening of anticipation, finally arrived at the crucial moment and with a deep breath, taken the initial step, eons later, a small voice somewhere is heard to say, "Don't," while two arms about one's neck refute the argument? Voodoo. Friday special. Restaurant patron. "Have you any whale, waiter?" "No, sir." "Have you any shark?" "No, sir." "Then give me a T-bone steak. God knows I asked for fish." "Waiter, there's a fly in my ice cream." Serves 'em right. Let 'em freeze. End of section 11.
Section 12 of Captain Billy's Whiz-Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Larry Willson. Captain Billy's Whiz-Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W. H. Fawcett. Our Rural Mailbox. Lou Z. Lizzie. I quite agree with you. A man who gives you his diamond ring to look at and then wants it back is no gentleman. Mary Ellen Slapapple. The fact that your sweetheart gave you 2 black eyes is striking proof of his affection. House E. Shakes. A change of pasture is good for the bull, you know, old dear. Item for me. Don't run your legs off after a woman. You'll need them to kick yourself. True lovers never say good night until morning. As a rule. Clerk at Employment Bureau. Someone has sent for a yardman, sir. Manager. Oh, we haven't any yardmen at present. Clerk. Then shall I send up 3 footmen, sir? The barber itch. 3 prospective brides were in conference, Madge, Mary, and Martha. Madge. I am to marry a lawyer with fine practice. We are building a beautiful home. Mary. My future husband is a banker, and we will have a summer home, a maid, and a car. Martha. Well, girls, if you must know, I am to marry a barber. Consternation reigned. What on earth are you going to marry a barber for? Gasped Madge and Mary. Martha. Because any time a barber isn't kissing you, he is talking about it. A timid bachelor recently walked into a dance hall by mistake, and thought he was in a lady's dressing room. Jack. You certainly disgraced me at the banquet last night when you got drunk. Jill. Oh, what did I do? Jack. When the Charlotte Russe was served, you tried to blow the foam off it. P.S. In conclusion, gentle readers, don't forget that Captain Billy's Encyclopedia of Humor and Poetry, the Winter Annual, Pedigreed Follies of 1921-22, is awaiting you at your newsdealer or the publisher. The Winter Annual contents: Drippings from the Faucet, Girl in Blue Velvet Band, Face on the Barroom Floor, Frankie and Johnny Blues, Shooting of Dan McGrew, Wedding of the Persian Cat, Ace in the Hole, Booze Fighter's Dream, Diary of a Divorce, Fable of the Bull, Highty-Tighty Aphrodite, Go Lightly Highballs, How to Kiss Deliciously, Hunting the Wily Polecat, Mohammedan Bull, our own Fairy Queen. Tool House on the Farm. The Old Smokehouse. Questions and Answers. Gila Monster wrote. Pasture Pot Pourri. Hooch Cure Blues. Dying Hobo. Laska. Sam's Girl. Toledo Slim. Evolution. Poppies. After the Raid. The Harpy. The Suicide. Tarnished Goods. Separation. Little Red God. The Ladies. Limber Kicks. Naughty but Nice. To the Girl. Rural Mailbox. Tired Hired Man. Life's a Funny Proposition after all. End of section 12. End of Captain Billy's Whiz Bang, Volume 3, Number 30, February 1922, by W. H. Fawcett.